Hey, Richard Knudson here again, and in this session I want to talk about the new Dynamic CRM 2011 Service Update, aka Polaris, and in particular I'm going to do a deep dive on the Flow user experience. And here's my contact information. Let's dive in. First of all, what is Polaris? Well, officially it was the code name for what was originally referred to as the Q2 2012 Service Update. It was renamed subsequently to the December 2012 Service Update, and finally released in January of 2013. But what's in a name, right? I'm going to stick with Polaris. A, it's cooler. B, it's shorter. And C, it'll help us maintain the legacy for subsequent star codename releases like Leo and Vega and Sagittarius. So let's call it Polaris. So what is it? It's got a lot of new features, probably more than the term service update would imply. Multiple browser support, redesigned user experience, Yammer integration, and iPad support via the Safari browser on the iOS platform. The browser support and the redesigned user experience, and that's the feature that I'm going to focus on here. Those are available now. Yammer integration and iPad through Safari, those are coming soon. And a Polaris update here shortly available. So let's talk about the Flow user experience. What it really consists of is a pretty dramatic redesign specifically of the forms for these 5 entities that you see here: contact, opportunity, lead, account, and case. And for maybe some obvious mnemonical purposes, we can refer to these as the COLAC entities. It's not every day you get a 5-letter acronym, so if you hear me say COLAC, that's what I'm referring to these. This is actually going to be a series of 3 sessions. This one is on the basics of the new user experience, and session 2 will be on the new visual sales and service processes. Those 2 sessions could be referred to as the things I like about the new Polaris user experience sessions. And in session 3, I'll talk about some of the limitations of the Polaris UX that for some organizations may make this part of Polaris not appropriate for a production environment. Now again, remember, I'm talking about one specific component of Polaris, the new forms for the 5 COLAC entities. There's a ton of important new stuff in Polaris overall, and some multiple browser and iPad support and the Yammer integration, for example, they go into my Implement Now category. But in the near term, the new UX may be more important as a demonstration of what's coming in the future than it is as a set of new features you need to be using right now. Well, let's take a closer look at the new Polaris UX. First, it's available now in Dynamic CRM Online only, and then it's an optional feature. Now, I don't know about your users, but mine generally don't like surprises. So it's important that you don't turn on the new UX accidentally. I tweeted an infographic recently from my Twitter account, Richard Knudson, that has step-by-step instructions on how to or not to turn on the new features, and I encourage you to check that out. But now let's talk about how the new user experience works. Probably the biggest improvement is the inline editing experience. If you've ever thought CRM had too many pop-ups, you'll really like this. Autosave is an important new feature, and we'll take a look at that. And Bing Maps integration is out of the box on the new accounts, leads, and contacts forms. And the form header is now editable. The new UX is flatter too, in the sense of being able to display information from related records on one form. But enough with the bullet points already. Let's switch to the demo and see how this all works. Starting in the accounts grid, notice that it's exactly the same as you're used to. Remember, the new UX only applies to the forms for the 5 COLAC entities. So let's open an account form and check out the new experience. The first big difference is that left navigation isn't visible by default and there's no ribbon. And you can see here how much screen real estate that frees up. Now let's check out the data entry experience. For example, I'll tab through these fields and update the address information for the current account record. Now, even though there's a little save button at the bottom right of the form, you don't need to use it because anytime you make a change and tab off the field, your information is auto-saved. Next, I'll scroll down a little on the form and you can see how the new out-of-the-box Bing Maps integration reflects the updated HQ address for Blue Yonder Airlines. Now, here's another important feature of the new UX. Compared to the classic forms experience, way fewer pop-ups. For example, add an activity by clicking the Activities tab and then clicking the Add Phone Call button and starting to type. It's a completely inline experience and a big improvement over the pop-ups on the old forms. So I'll enter the information on the phone call and click OK to save it out, and you can see the activities list is updated to reflect the phone call I received. Next, I'll add a follow-up task in essentially the same way. First, I'll enter some information in the description field, specify the date I want it done by, the priority. And then save it. And the list refreshes as before. But notice that the task has been saved as open. So when I've completed it, I can simply click the Complete button right here from the list. Now, I mentioned before that navigation is hidden by default, but it's still there. You just have to expand the navigation pane. And once expanded, it works the same way as on the classic forms. For example, you can access the activities regarding the current record in the usual way, and you can see here the two activities I just entered for this account. And notice, if I open one of these records, this is the old school version of the task form here. Sometimes you might want this. For example, if you need to access the fields that aren't exposed in the inline experience, like these down here at the bottom of the task form. Other things about navigation work the same way you're used to. Click on Cases here to see the cases associated with this record. Click on the blue links to quickly access the various tabs on the form and so forth. And if you look closely while I'm doing this, you'll notice that even what I'm doing here is a little bit more inline than the classic forms. For example, these drop-down lists are a little flatter than you might be used to. All in all, my early impression is that the data entry experience is definitely smoother and easier. And here's something that's quite a bit different. The section up here with the annual revenue, number of employees, and owner fields, this is actually the form header. And notice it's no longer read-only. So this would really be a great place to draw attention to a small number of the most important fields on a form and let somebody use them. Now, I just closed the form without saving so we can test my earlier claim that all of my changes are saved. You can see when I reopen the form here, sure enough, everything I entered was auto-saved in the database even though I didn't click the Save button. So that's pretty nice. So now, let's close the account form and take a look at the case form. Remember, case is another of the entities that receive the flow treatment in Polaris, and when you open a form, you will notice a dramatic difference. As you can see here, when I open a new case form. The highlighted area at the top is designed to visually represent the stages and steps of work processes. Here we're on a case form, so it exposes a service process, but you can probably guess in the opportunity or lead forms, you'll see representation of a sales process. Now, this is important enough to warrant its own session for sure, so I won't say anything else about it here. But what I will do now is enter some basic information about the case, such as the title and the subject. But watch what happens when I enter the customer the case is for. This new customer details section fills in with a combination of information from the account record as well as some other related information. This is another great example of the so-called flattened experience. On one form, we have access to information from several different records, but there's no bulky grids or associated views. Everything's just right here, easily accessible on the form. Now I'll enter information in a few more fields about the case. And then, suppose I want to add a note or attach a file to the case record. Notice that adding a note has received the same inline treatment as adding activities. No pop-ups, more fluid, easier to get your stuff done. As a matter of fact, about the only time you'll encounter a pop-up is on the Attach File dialog you'll see next. So that's a wrap for our review of the basic Polaris user experience. Coming up in session 2, visual sales and service processes. Richard Knudson signing off, and I hope you found that helpful.